All right, 9:27 Eastern Time, a live look in Manhattan this morning on this Thursday. Dow was down about 35 points yesterday, but the inflation report came out showing a slight cooling. But again, overall, inflation still up 3.3% year over year.
The Fed, meantime, holding interest rates steady for the seventh straight time and scaling back the outlook for rate reductions later this year as high inflation lingers on. Here to weigh in, Brandon Arnold is the Executive Vice President of the National Taxpayers Union. Paul Mueller, he's an economist with the American Institute for Research. So, Brandon, we'll start with you. Your thoughts on the Fed holding rates steady, a 23-year high. What does this mean for Americans looking to purchase homes or cars?
Well, Americans need rate relief right now. When you look at the amount of credit card debt that people are carrying right now, it's over $1 trillion. When you look at the difficulty that goes into purchasing a home or an automobile, like you said, people can't afford 7.5% interest rates, especially when housing costs are extremely high. So it's really disappointing that this president and the Congress have not done more to drive down inflation, because we're paying the price for it each and every day with these astonishingly high interest rates.
You can even see it. You mentioned this administration. Prices are up nearly 20% since Joe Biden took office. We have a graphic here that you can take a look at. And in this, virtually everything is up. We showed you motor vehicle insurance is up 20%, making it difficult even to own a car. You can see transportation services, 10.5%, tobacco products, hospital services, 7%. That was already expensive. Something happens to your car, you got another 7% on top of that. And then, of course, electricity up there, 5.9%. And you mentioned rent, obviously, almost unaffordable for many. Talk to us a little bit about that, Paul.
Well, we're still, we have the lingering effects of so much government spending. The past 4 years have seen really unprecedented amounts of government borrowing and spending, stimulus spending with the Inflation Reduction Act, the CHIPS Act, the various bills that they've done. And I think that spending is still working its way through the system. And so until that spending comes through, we're going to see prices remaining elevated. I think the reason markets were up yesterday is at one point people were worried that the Fed would have to raise interest rates even more to deal with inflation. I think the CPI report yesterday and the Fed's indication that they're going to cut and not raise has got people, at least on Wall Street, in a much happier place about where the economy may be heading. Again, that we're still kind of a wait and see how soon things really cool off.
All right. As we wait for that, we've got an update to a storyline we've been following since last week. Of course, when we saw the First Lady travel between Delaware and France for those D-Day celebrations. Brandon, we're learning the National Taxpayers Union Foundation calculated the costs. It's up to $345,400, by the way, which is really a lot of money when you're thinking about flight costs. And that you're saying taxpayers are footing the bill. Can you clear this up? I thought the DNC came forward saying they were going to cover the cost. Who's footing this bill?
Well, it's not clear right now, but we did calculate the cost. And like you said, a couple $100,000 in costs incurred by the First Lady going back to Delaware to be with her son. Now, usually the way this works, when the DNC says they're going to reimburse the cost of this trip, usually that means they're going to cover the first class ticket that would normally be used there. But a first class ticket back and forth between Delaware and Paris would cost about $7,000. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. So it's not clear if they're going to do that $7,000 or if they're going to do the entire enchilada there. I'm a little skeptical about their level of reimbursement here, but certainly if they don't pick up the full cost, it's us, it's the taxpayer that is going to have to do so.
The national debt sitting at $34.7 trillion. The Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen recently spoke out about this not too long ago here, Paul, on this, saying this, that the debt load is in a reasonable place if it remains at this level. Why would that comment be put out there, that is a reasonable place? Again, $34 trillion, Paul.
That's a great question. I don't know what planet she's on here, what world that is reasonable. It's far from reasonable. As people say or have noted, the interest that we are paying on the debt is enormous. It's topping $1 trillion. It's more than we pay on national defense every year. So if you think about all the money that we pay salaries for soldiers, tanks, equipment, fuel, administration, flights, sending people around the world, engagements. We're spending more than that just paying interest on the current debt, and the debt is rising. It's not as if we're plateauing at 34.7. It'll surpass 35 trillion this summer. We don't know how far it'll go, and the next administration will definitely have to deal with the fallout of this.
Yeah, it just you think about your own personal credit card debt. And if you put that number out there and told the credit card companies, look, hey, that's a reasonable area. This is kind of where we're going to hover at. I don't know if that would be acceptable. But
just
again,
put a few more flights to Paris on there.
Hey, apparently that's okay. That's covered. Paul Mueller joining us in Brandon Arnold. Thank you both. We do appreciate that.
Thanks.
Well, Israel